are back
to talk about the state of night. No, I'm sorry.
So, well, this is awkward because we just got our last live show just got destroyed. We had people watching it, so we hope that they migrate their way back. The streaming software that we are using, Restream.io, like just straight ended it, didn't allow me to relaunch it. So hopefully people will wander their way back into this live stream. But for everyone, we apologize for whatever caused that. It seems like there was some kind of weird internet glitch. Not sure, but hopefully it's all working now.
I mean, Kemper and I do live in the mountains, so that could.
Yeah, I mean, it says
good
our
internet,
connections are all good.
Yeah, my internet's doing fine, but
it could be a technical glitch with YouTube. Honestly, I've heard of this happening. So, but this is now the official live stream, hopefully. So
I don't know.
Now that everyone knows that the last one got destroyed and they have no access to it. So we should actually probably go on to the actual show again because we have to start over.
To start from the beginning. Well, today we're going to talk about the state of Nikon, everyone, in 2022. Kind of looking forward into 2023, though, I guess, in theory. We're looking back and we're looking forward. But I believe.
So, okay, we are a little rattled here, guys. So sorry. We're talking about the state of Nikon, and we're starting by talking about that they announced an all-black Batman version of the Nikon ZFC. You guys there? Hello?
Yeah, I was going to say something I think just cut out.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Toby?
I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, let's, I guess, just continue. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on. Should we just end it and then start over again?
Up to you. I don't really know what to do.
I don't know what to do either.
What is the problem right now?
I don't know. You had no audio.
I mean,
it was all cutting out.
Now, huh? Can you guys hear each other?
Yes.
Can everyone in the live stream?
No one's watching it.
Actually, if anybody's in the live stream, can you say something?
Yes. Please drop something in chat if you're watching this right now, because we're having major technical stuff.
Oh, somebody is in the chat.
Yeah, someone's there. Yay. Okay.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Here we go. So after all of that, we're so sorry. We have no idea what's going on. Okay. So Nikon ZFC Black Edition. Batman Edition.
Batman Edition.
I want one.
It's like the perfect Christmas gift for Kemper if anyone's like interested in buying Kemper $1,000 Christmas gift.
Well, and Kemper was saying the full frame version would be what would get him, which
exactly. I really think that Nikon should go with this full frame, do a full frame version of this FC. It's such a good aesthetic, and it's like, I don't know, they're going head to head with Fuji right now with the ZFC and the APS-C. I think doing a full frame version would just be something to really differentiate, and I would love it. So,
well, and I think they could almost go with like a Sony A7 original, like updated and everything. Like if you combine that aesthetic with, or the aesthetic you have with that type of camera. So
exactly.
Well, and this is very similar to the Nikon F mount. I believe it was the Nikon DF or something like that. The digital F mount camera from way back. That was full frame and like didn't shoot video and had the dials and stuff. I honestly feel like they've pulled off that retro look even better though with this camera. I mean, it literally has no grip on it, which is an interesting choice as far as the ergonomics.
Small rig came to the rescue. Small rig came to the rescue on that. So,
I mean, Small rig is like the dark horse of being like the company that solves all of the other companies' problems. They just like
So that is interesting to say because like Small Rig just recently put out a new mic system. They have a new V mount battery system. Like they are low key turning into a really important company to the camera industry. And
a new
it's
video tripod too.
oh
Like a
yeah,
high-end video tripod. They've been doing a
yeah.
lot of stuff. We should do a state of small rig.
State of Small Rig. Okay. So just to go over what we're talking about today, we are talking about the state of Nikon at the end of 2022. The full release cycle seems to be over for all the camera companies. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be going over each company and kind of talking about what they put out this year, what we hope or think they're going to put out next year, and then kind of our thoughts on a strategy for their approach for or what we want them to do.
Or yeah,
It's,
just
it's
how-
really
Well,
comes down to what we want
and
them to do.
I think maybe even a little bit a strategy for people who are using Nikon or interested in Nikon. You know, is it a good time to switch or not? Could be like another element because, you know, in the end, what Nikon's doing next year is already locked in, I'm sure.
Oh
Or
yeah, it was locked in
pretty
probably
pretty
before
close to
2022
being locked
started.
in.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do
Um,
what it would take for us to switch to Nikon. I mean, Kemper's
I
50%
mean,
Nikon,
I'm
but
already
like,
shooting
well,
Nikon.
me and
There's
Toby
a
would
would-
it
Z9
take?
right there. Yeah.
I mean, so the question I think I would ask Kemper right now, before we jump into some of the slides and stuff, for some of the people who rejoined, we'll be re-looking at some of those slides.
Yep.
But what was your reasoning for rebuying into Nikon's system with the Z9 again?
So I want to make a whole video about this because the Z9, first off, I buy into the Nikon quote unquote way. I actually like what Canon's doing in some ways better. Like, you know, if like there's lots of things I like Canon's lenses a little bit better, some of the stuff they're doing, and there's some of their general philosophy I like better.
Yeah.
But the way that Nikon does stuff, just the way their cameras operate, their image quality, their color science, there's all these little things about Nikon that I just really appreciate. They are truly photographers' cameras, and that's something we can talk about quite a bit in this video. Is that their video specs are good with the Z9, but as a video ecosystem, they're quite a bit behind Canon and Sony. So I'm excited to kind of see where Nikon's going to take that. There's some advantages, like they don't have a cinema line to cannibalize, and you know, we've all those talking points have been talked about many times before. But
well, theoretically too, they could just completely overwhelm the industry if they really decided to dive into video because of that. Like they don't have to care.
right.
So,
But
maybe.
to really answer your question, nail it down. If you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago to mock up my perfect camera with a grip, with like just the megapixels and everything, and the design of the camera, I probably would have outlined something that is very similar to the Z9. So that's kind of where I jump in. I have a hard time not wanting to own that camera, and it fits really well with my system right now. I shoot, I shoot both Canon and Nikon, but the 24-120 is, as far as like landscape image quality goes, the best mid-range zoom I have found. It's super sharp. It's just got a great image quality, honestly.
Is it as sharp as a 70 to 200? Do you think?
Boy, it sure feels as sharp. I don't know. I'd have to do a comparison to see at some point, but it feels as sharp. So yeah, I really like that lens, and it fits
Yeah.
really well because the Canon 24-105 RF is honestly, I feel like their weakest RF lens, the f4 version. It's good, but not great. And the 24-120 is great. I also love that it goes out to 120, that little extra reach. When I'm shooting with it, I actually shoot at 120 a ton. It's like
Mhm.
you almost get that 135 field of view. That's really good. So
So
Yeah, I was gonna
being
say
someone
for-
that's used the R3 and the A1 pretty extensively on the A1,
yeah.
what is it about the Z9 that has kept it in your system, and made you kind of step back to
I
it
would've
and re-add it to your system?
I would have stuck with the R3 if it had the megapixels. Right now, it's the megapixels. That
Well,
being said, I think I like the Z9. I would say right now, the Z9 is my favorite camera that I've ever used, just as a whole. There are some things about the R3 that I really like the ergonomics in hand with the R3, so good, and the size. But the Z9 just, I don't know, it pulls it all together. It's the ultimate Nikon camera. If you've been a Nikon shooter for a long time, you're gonna love using the Z9. That's just kind of the way it is.
well, and in
As far
some
as the
ways,
A1 goes, like I liked the image quality. I liked the 50 megapixels. It just it was the same camera as I mean, same, it has the same ergonomics as all of their other cameras, basically. There's just the dial on the left that differentiates it, which, you know, that's not that big of a deal. Um, I, you know, I like Sony to me just isn't it's a nuanced thing as far as my issues with Sony, but what it really comes down to is that Canon and Nikon cameras are you can tell they're designed by camera companies, and with Sony's you can kind of tell that they're designed by the same company that makes PlayStation. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just it doesn't have the 60, 70, 80 years of camera development in the DNA. I guess that's the best way to say it. So
well, and I will defend Sony a little bit. I think Sony's working their way that way. Like the A7 IV was excellent in what they added, like the little dial to switch between video and stills. The dials in general kind of felt better. The A7R5 from Sony is also like more merging into that. I love the new screen. That is, I
right,
would say it
right.
quite makes up for some other stuff, but it's really cool. So like if we see an A1 Mark II or something similar to that, like where they incorporate all these things and a grip, then all of a sudden
Yep.
Sony's maybe changing the game a
And
little bit. But
the Z9 also, it's a absolute beast to hold. Like I've never held a camera before that I'd be more confident to take to super extreme places or, use as a weapon in a back alley if I had to. And it's certainly heavy enough. So with that, we should probably jump into our talking about the state of Nikon here, because how we're gonna start this is we're gonna talk about the bodies that they released, which is short and sweet because technically they only released one that I could figure out. I did a lot of Googling to make sure, but as far as I remember, and then that's all that really matters, right? So like this is the impact they've had on the industry is the Z9 and the Z30 as far as bodies that they put out. Now, the Z9, it was announced in October 2021, started shipping on Christmas Eve, but it's effectively a 2022 camera. And it's so important to the Nikon story in 2022 that I had to include it here on the bodies that they've released. So, and then there's the little Z30, their little vlogging camera, which
Now
from what I've heard is good.
I wanted to jump in here and point out something that I think is telling about Nikon's future looking forward is the Z30 is the first camera that I'm aware of that Nikon's ever released that its purpose is to shoot video. It's an augmented
Wow.
Z50 for
Right.
vlogging specifically. And literally, like if you look at its page on B&H, you scroll down and it's Nikon Z30. They released it with this little grip that it comes with to like make holding it in selfie mode easier with like a start and stop button and more controls on the front. it has it looks like a shotgun mic on the top of it, and right off the bat they're talking about the 4K video sensor design on the Z30.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is actually a really interesting camera to me because, at least for me, some of our more Nikon savvy viewers may have been more obvious to them, but this camera just totally slipped past me as far as it goes. So it didn't get a
Yeah.
lot of attention, considering it's kind of exactly what everyone's asking for.
I
Um,
know it is.
and
It's random.
and in a sense, they released. I'm trying to think what Sony's recent release was. It was the Sony.
ZVE10 kind of
It
the
was
APS-C. Yeah,
yes, they released one of these as well. So Sony released essentially a response to the Z30, and Canon is yet to do so. But I
yeah,
think it's a really interesting camera. You know, it's got the enhanced microphones on the top. You can see, and it's got the flip screen. It doesn't have a viewfinder, because for vlogging, the viewfinder is pointless.
Yeah.
At least when you're shooting yourself. Obviously, if you're shooting other things, it comes back into being useful. But I think it's a fascinating little camera that, for me, slipped totally under my radar as a user of the Z50 for a short time. It's a great little camera, produces a great image.
yeah.
About a year and a half ago, I left Nikon. I was using the Z6 II for a few months. You can actually go back and check out some of those videos and my thoughts on that camera.
Right.
And they really they need to get these Z9 specs into their lower end cameras, and that needs to be mission critical for them in 2023 as far as camera body releases. Is the Z6 III with 10-bit internal, N-Log internal, and just generally a flip screen on the Z6 III, so fully articulating touchscreen. These are pretty low hanging fruit things, like no crop in 4K. This is stuff that they need to do. And if I was to build my perfect Z6 III, I would say that if they could make it $2,500 and have it shoot 4K 120, even if it's cropped, that would be
That'd be
huge.
huge.
Yeah.
That'd be huge. And we'll
Yeah,
get
even
to
if
that
they
when we
did a
talk about
1.5 or
predictions
something.
later in the show. But JB the creative says, I would love a Z9, but have too many other cameras and can't justify to wife why I want it.
Relatable.
It's relatable. Like, yes, the Z9 to me, its sales pitch and why it's, in a lot of ways, it's a monster hybrid camera. Like, it shoots stills and video so well. And you look at the specs of it, the 8K 60 internal that seems to run pretty smooth, the ProRes, and then it has great video specs. Like, I feel like if Nikon had a better video ecosystem, which, you know, we can talk about, that Sony and Canon kind of have the cinema lines that they both are afraid to cannibalize, but they can also kind of flex and use some assets from that. And then the fact that just in the industry, you know, people don't use Nikon for video. They haven't. And they've been using Sony and Canon for years and years.
I feel like there was a stint though where people were using the D750, right? D750, D7.
Oh, I mean, there sure has
the
been people.
f-stoppers. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
mean
f-stoppers guys, they did.
Yeah.
Well, and then like documentaries, for instance, like D800s or D800Es were used quite a bit on a documentary that we all like called Meru, done by Jimmy Chin before he did and it was done so well and utilized so well. So it's not to say that Nikon hasn't been used, but it's not the industry standard per se.
No. Yeah.
Well, and they've never done video. The reason why they aren't the industry standard is that Nikon's never done video to the cutting edge very well.
Yeah.
Their first cameras that had 1080p were super soft, and they were the last of the big three to get usable video autofocus by like many years. I mean, the D850 shot great full frame 4K, but it didn't have any continuous autofocus, more or less.
Oh yeah. I
And
used it for some video then, and like it was a manual focus video camera. Like, don't touch it.
And
But-
they made a huge leap with the Z6 and the Z7 with their video AF.
The
Right.
Z6 was a big
sensor
deal.
phase detect.
The Z6 too was a big deal because they had RAW through an external recorder, right? If I
That was
remember
actually
right.
the Z6 original.
That was the Z6 original.
Oh, yeah,
So, yeah. So
Random
if
question
we're
for-
looking, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say for JB, if you're still in, do you do video or just stills or both?
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Just out of
because,
curiosity.
Yeah, like we said, the
indeed.
Z9's got that hybrid. So the real story, I feel like, well, other than the Z9 and kind of the impact it's had on the industry, I feel like the lenses that Nikon put out in 2022, in a lot of ways, those are the story, because there's some really unique stuff, and then some not so unique stuff. I'm looking at you, 17 to 28 2.8. That's based
Not
on
a
the
Tamron
Tamron
lens, right?
right? But the 800-6.3, the 600 f4 with the teleconverter, which we talked about quite a bit last week, but it still is a huge part of the narrative of Nikon in 2022. And then the 400 4.5, which is behind me right there. And I can tell you, I haven't fully tested it yet, not enough to give a review, but I'm pretty darn impressed with that lens. And I wasn't that impressed with the 100 to 400, much to the ire of many of our subscribers who have commented on that video.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask about that. So obviously you love the Canon 100 to 500. How does the 400 4.5 stack up against that in terms of
too soon to tell. Too soon to tell.
Okay.
I'm going to be testing some of that stuff out. I'm going to be testing some of that stuff out soon. But my early tests say that the 400 4.5, it's got remarkable sharpness and image quality, and I'm really excited to use it. JB the Creative responded. He does shoot both, and he has a Canon R5, A7S III, Sony A7 IV, and he just got an XH2. Wow, that's quite the lineup there. I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
I do love the as I've previously owned the R5, the S3, and the A7 IV at the same time.
You have a whole video about that. That's probably why he's
Indeed.
following this channel. He's like someone else out there just like me.
Indeed.
Oh my God.
I will give you a justification for owning the Z9 if you want one, but I don't think you're going to like it very much.
Okay.
And that is that the Z9 is very much like combining all of the cameras you own into one, except we have issues. Fair. He just said we have issues, Toby. We do. We do. I'm working on my camera addiction. For the other two guys on the podcast, Kemper and Brandon, they both have a lens addiction, and it's really bad. Mine is a camera addiction.
It's bad. Yeah. It's bad.
I find cameras so much more tantalizing than lenses, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And so in that regard, I definitely feel you. But you could take all those cameras, put them into a Z9, and in theory, I don't know that you're losing a ton of capability. I mean, your S3, that low light performance, I mean, you know it if you own the camera, it's insane. And other cameras just don't quite meet that 12,800 ISO performance, dynamic range, and color retention. I haven't used the XH2, so I don't really know. But as far as the R5 and the A7 IV, the Z9, in my experience, is literally just all of the things you don't like about those cameras or you feel like are missing are just kind of solved. It is humongous, though. Like, I've used it. It's huge. And the gripped body format just isn't as useful for video. And that would be, once again, it's like Nikon, give me all these video specs in a camera that makes sense for video. It's kind of all that I really want.
Yeah.
And
I
they're
mean,
gonna.
I'm
hate
not
me
going to
for saying
switch, but still, it would be cool.
this is so off topic for Nikon, anyways. But I will say, you do kind of get the best of both worlds with all of them in the R3. So with the R3, you do get way better low light performance. It's not quite A7S3 level, but you do get that low light quality that you don't
Interesting.
really get with the R5. You get the sharpness of the A7 IV from Sony. You still get the 240 frames per second for video in 1080 like you do on the S3. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You also get the grip. You also get, just a very usable body in general. The only thing you're missing out on is megapixels, which I haven't noticed a huge deal with. So that's my little spiel.
Well, and the colors on the R3 are so good, but the colors on the Z9 are great too. Like the Z9 suffered the same issues with Lightroom. So, this is maybe a topic for another day. I'm not going to dive super into this, how much Adobe controls the camera industry because of Lightroom. And that's how everybody looks at all their photos. But Adobe really screwed over both the Canon R5 and the Z9 for the first 6 months of both of those cameras' existence because they did not have good camera profiles. Like the camera profiles that they had installed were just, the colors were terrible. Like they just weren't good. And it took forever, especially with the R5. It took over a year for them to get the R5's color profiles. And it completely changed the game. Like I literally sold the Canon R5 the first go around because I'm like, I just am not vibing on these colors. And now I love them. Like, I really, really love the colors on the R5. So Adobe really wields a lot of power in the camera industry because so many people, and I'm really grateful, even though I'm a Lightroom user kind of end to end right now. At least that's what I'm trying to be. Because of, well, we can talk about that another day. But anyway, I love that there's some competition really entering the industry with Capture One and Luminar that are going to help push Adobe to, I don't know, maybe clean up its act a little bit and be more on the ball with some of their stuff. Because like the raw interpolation, or however you say that, with both Capture One and Luminar are so much better than Adobe if it doesn't have those camera profiles. If it's got those camera profiles, we're all good. But if it doesn't, Adobe's presets are horrible.
I mean, all the video editing software competition is not helping Adobe get their act together. So
that's true.
Worries
That's
me
true.
a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rough right now. The performance is really what I'm getting at. I mean, the workflow with Premiere is what it is. I don't think it's worse than the other companies, but the performance is very bad right now. And everyone I know who uses Premiere is in torture on a daily basis. I was talking to one of my friends who's like a professional video editor, and she was telling me that she spends like 2 hours on the phone with them, like a couple times a week, panicking over something not exporting. I mean, maybe that's somewhat exaggerated, but that is what she told me. And it's like, that's bad. Like if you're a video editor, you do not want to lose your video project or not have it export. It's like a nightmare. So this is off the state of Nikon, but it is something that Adobe needs to work on I guess it's their software streamlining. I'm not sure, but
they've got to.
Well, and it's losing people's sales. Like, sorry, I'll go on my little rant and we can move on. But like, I was gonna buy the R5. I was pretty close to it back in 2020, which we'll have a whole video now with this. But that was one of the big problems that like stopped me from switching. I was like, oh, the red specifically, like when in Lightroom, the red saturation was just horrendous,
and it was hard to edit. It was hard to edit. I mean, you could, but it wasn't a guarantee I'm going to be able to get good colors out of this because those Adobe presets are completely garbage. So now that we're kind of halfway, but halfway here, we're looking at what Nikon has put out in 2022.
Before we move on from that, what's your guys' favorite lens release of
Yes.
2022?
Oh
Yes.
boy.
Oh, that's actually really hard. Cause I like.
I can go first if you guys want to hear my little spiel on it.
Yeah, please.
I'm different from Kemper and Toby, and that Kemper is definitely a landscape photographer, like through and through. Like he can do all of it, but that's his passion, his love, whatnot. Yeah. Toby, I think, follows that not too far behind, but obviously Toby's he's the video guy. So
yeah,
I'm very much in love with the 600 f4. It's not quite, it doesn't align with the portrait side of me as much, but I think that lens, just you get the f4, like some of the shots you could do at f4, like with some of the work I do, like I'm just like, ooh, that's gonna be creamy. You're able to do wildlife in the way I'd maybe want to do wildlife. Like, not to say the 800-6.3 wouldn't maybe be a better option, but I think that's, I don't know. For me, I think 600 f4 is my.
Yeah, and I'm in the same, like, we talked about this last week, but it's really resonated with me that the 600 f4 is the stuff you can get with it is so unique and so special. Like, I mean, the 400-2.8 is right there too. And like the 600, the 800-6.3, like I don't want to, poo-poo that lens because I think it's a great innovative thing that they've packed that kind of image quality. But I don't think you're getting that special thing that you get with a 600 f4 and a
because of the 2x
with the depth of field. Right.
Because of the 2x teleconvert, the 1.4x teleconverter that's built in, it really hurts the purpose of the 800-6.3, considering you're getting a very similar light gathering performance and you're getting about an 840. And obviously you can put a 2x teleconverter on the 800, but
and the reviews I've seen says that it's similar image quality. Like, so the 600 f4, like, lenses like that are just so and then they're industry leading. And that's honestly, I think that's interesting. Nikon is carving itself. Like, look at the lenses that they've put out this year. And you could argue that I could have put the 400-2.8 on this list. It was technically announced in 2021, but it's like everyone who's gotten it has used it, similar to the Z9, excuse me. But you look at where they're investing. They are investing a lot of energy in these really high quality telephoto primes, which means that what they want is they want the sports photographer. They want the wildlife photographer. They want some of those niches is what they're going after, that market. And like, if you're the kind of shooting that you do, you make your money from a 600 f4 or a 400-2.8, you're buying a Z9 and that, because it's a whole level better. Like, even if the image quality and the weight or whatever are all similar, the built-in teleconverter, like, it changes how you can shoot and what you're able to do with those lenses with the built-in teleconverter. And then throw on 800-6.3 and the 400 4.5. Like, the 400 4.5 is, you still get relatively high speed in a very compact light package. I mean, that lens sitting back there, it's lighter than a 7200. Like, it may be slightly bigger overall, but it's lighter. And like, using that lens in the field is like going to be so really fun. So that's kind of where,
Well, and the thing that I think is also funny and maybe telling about Nikon's strategy, basically just supporting what Kemper just said about what they're targeting, is that they are releasing these lenses in lieu of releasing stuff that, a lot of people would maybe expect or want more. Like, I don't like a 24-1.4. Certainly more people are going to be able to afford and need that.
Or like
1.4s in general. I don't know that they really have any 1.4s. They've gone 1.8 and then they have the 51.2.
Well, they
right,
say
and
they're
85-1.2 is on the
to
horizon, which we can talk about in a
85-1.2 is on the
second.
horizon, but
Yeah.
they aren't releasing basic lenses. I mean, the 17-28, and I'm not going to give that one the win. I do think that's a very important lens. The win is just going to be the 600 f4 with the 1.4x teleconverter, because that's new, different, revolutionary. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So that one I think has to win for their best lens of the year. But the 17-28 right now feels a little silly, maybe, or kind of like, oh, it's just like a re-put together 17-28 from Tamron. That
Yeah.
lens is actually really good. So if the optics
Mhm.
are actually the same, it's going to be a pretty good performer for the price. But also, if we get a good video, full frame video camera that isn't just the Z9, if we get a Z6 Mark III, then that 17-28 is all of a sudden going to look really good to a lot of people interested in Nikon for video. So it's a very important lens in my mind,
Mhm. Mhm.
for Nikon to have,
It's
because the 14-24 has a bulbous front element.
no, that's
It does.
fair.
You can put filters on it, but they're 112 millimeters, which is huge and expensive. And
silly big.
well, and it's better for stills than for video. So, and part of the, I mean, like I have a Canon 15-35 filming me right now. And to me, as far as wide angle goes, and then, we'll talk about this on the Canon show where some of their lenses are just so they just hit it out of the park in usability. That
Well, and
like that's why I'm using both systems is as for usability, the Canon has some real advantages. For video, the 15-35 is so good, but for stills, like that 14-35 is really, really good. So yeah.
I think when it comes down to it, basically Canon and Sony both kind of are killing it for that like lower range of like lenses, like lower millimeter. But Nikon is killing the like wildlife game. Like even with the Z9 autofocus, like Z9 and an 800-6.3, that's silly good. Same with all the other lenses we're seeing right here. So
Well, and it's that super high end stuff that they're just,
Yeah.
it's very obvious that that's what they're targeting, is
They-
high end photographers,
Well, and
and
they're
high
so-
end photographers in the fact of like needing these huge zooms and stuff. I mean, I expect to see a Z mount 180-400 f4 pretty
Yeah.
soon. That's another like mainstay lens that we can expect to see, somewhat soon from Nikon, at least with the direction that they're going. I mean, maybe 2022 and end of 2021 was just getting the necessary sports class out there.
Well, and they could be doing that
Right.
thing that
Don't you mean the 180-200 like the Tamron?
no 180 to 400 is that
400.
classic Nikon lens, zoom
The
lens.
Oh, well, and then, honestly, we should probably use this as a segue into our predictions or kind of what's on the horizon, because it's some of this stuff like the 200-600 is on their roadmap. The 70-180, which is another Tamron kind of not exactly rip off. I don't know how that's working, and I'd love to know. But 70-180, similar to Tamron. So 200-600, 85-1.2. So those three lenses we know are coming. Nikon has basically either said in their roadmap or hinted at or various things. As far as other lenses coming out, the 35-1.2, everyone's kind of wondering where that is, and it should be coming soon, hopefully. 105-1.4, again, that 105-1.4 on the F mount is a legendary lens, and I think everyone would love to see that on Z mount and see what it does. Yeah. And then there's been some rumblings, and of course, I'm maybe putting my ears down to the tracks, maybe a little bit too hard, but the 120-300 doing basically a built-in what do you call it,
Converter.
the converter, basically building in the converter and doing a Yeah. So, but
Oh,
someone is hopefully they have a 135 1.8.
from
That would be
Sony, I'm
another
assuming, or
right. Oh, he may be saying Canon, but
well, Canon
or
doesn't.
maybe he's
Didn't they
hoping
just
that's what
release it?
Nikon comes out with, because that would be amazing if Nikon came out with something in that range. I like 135
Oh, okay.
better than 105 personally. I feel like it's more versatile, because we talked about this last week with the Canon 135, where you can use it as a sports lens too. And I feel like at 105, you're like, but you take it out to 135 and it's suddenly more of a sports lens. Oh,
Oh, it's
he
on the
says it's on
roadmap
the
now.
roadmap.
Hold on.
Wow. Okay. That's a big deal.
Let's
That's a
see.
big deal. Okay. Well, that's gonna be a huge deal. I'm probably
I actually disagree with you though, Kemper. Love to see a 135 1.8 out. Like I had that with Sony, got some really, really cool images with it. But I think for portraiture, like the portraiture I do, I think a 105 1.4 would probably be better. And also, like, I don't think this is what's going to happen, but if they came out with a 105, like 1.2, like that's my switching moment.
Right, but
Maybe
it would be as big as the 120 to 300, but
yeah,
and
I'm okay with that. I think if it's as big as the 28 to 70 f2 from Canon.
The reason, exactly. The reason I have the 120 to 300 on here is that I use that lens a little bit. I love that lens so hard. It's a beautifully made and rendered lens. I would love to see it done in kind of Z packaging. Using the adapter is fine, but I would love to see that. And then if they put in a 1.4 teleconverter, like that's it. That's all I'm shooting for the rest of my life. I'm joking.
Wow. Nikon.
Really.
Well, no, it's saying something though. Nikon has potential right now. Is what I'm like. I actually didn't go into this thinking I was going to say that, but like, oh my gosh, like they're missing one thing for me, maybe, but I don't know. We can get into that later, but they have potential, I think, is what's happening.
So I accidentally mistyped. It says the Z6 III as far as bodies coming, and I typed, and then below it, I typed in Z9 again instead of Z8. That's a typo. But it may have been more of a Freudian slip than a typo, because I actually wonder if this legendary Z8 is actually coming, because the Z9 has sold so incredibly well. Like, do you guys feel like a Z8 is even in Nikon's best interest? And so we're theorizing that a Z8 is like a D850 competitor. And why, Toby? And what does it have that's different than the Z9?
And people in the audience also throw your thoughts in there too. Like, I want to hear what you guys think about that Z8 idea.
So I guess Kemper was about to say it's a D850 replacement. I don't think it should be a D850 replacement. I think there's two things you can do with that camera that could be powerful. The first thing is the Z8 is your high resolution body. So it's the 61 megapixel camera. So it has more megapixels, is slower, pulls some specs out, maybe comes in at $3,500 or $3,200, something like that. What I don't really, if I'm being honest, what I don't really want to see Nikon do is put that 61 megapixel sensor in the Z7 III. I think the Z7 III needs to be the hybrid lower version of the Z9 that has 47 megapixels still, just as it does now, with improved video specs, and just isn't quite as it's just the baby Z9 is all the Z7 III is. The Z8 is that in between. The direction they could go with the Z8 to make me want it is to do a low resolution video first monster that has really high frame rates and stuff. But I kind of doubt that we're going to see that. But basically, the Z8 could be the R3 competitor, or the R3's version, Nikon's version of the Canon R3. Could be the other option for it. So I do feel like there's
like the Z9.
Potentially, it's just like a lower resolution, more video focused version, because I think for Nikon to be competitive in the market that we're in right now, they need to push the video specs. And right now they have a fantastic film ready, like ready to shoot films camera in the Z9, but
Right.
it's a $5,500 camera that can be pretty easily, outplayed with the other brands. At least Canon has, the R5C and the R5, which offer most of what the Z9 does from a video perspective. And it doesn't have a flip screen, and it doesn't have some of those things you really want. They just need to get that trickled down into other bodies in a more video format. So I could see it being the high res body as the more likely actual option. I would love to see that Z8 be the video version of the Z9 that's a little cheaper.
Would you guys be disappointed? This is a double-edged sword of a question. So I think this is what you're saying, Toby, but if Nikon comes out with basically an R3 as a in between the, well, I don't know how this is going to work out price wise. That's a whole different thing, because the Z9 is already like significantly cheaper than the other flagship bodies, but basically an R3 between the Z7 II and the Z9. And then, Kemper, would you be disappointed if the Z9 or sorry, the R1 theoretical camera from Canon is basically a upgraded Z9 in Canon's terms, like not getting that much more megapixels, but keeping most of what the R3 has? And
no, I don't think I would be disappointed in that. I mean, maybe a little bit. I think part of me is getting kind of attached to the idea that the R1's going to have 80 megapixels. Which I think is likely at this point, especially with kind of the rumors that we're seeing, especially with kind of the way that flagships are going with that you can now, like, you're going to have high megapixel capability, but then you can downsample into lower megapixels to get that higher frame rates. And I think that's what the R1 is going to do. So, but if the R1 comes in similar to the Z9, actually that's great. Like, I'll just have a Z9 and an R1. But I'm excited about more megapixels, and like part of me is hoping for the Z8 to be high megapixels. I actually had a theory, and I was thinking about this. Actually, just it occurred to me for the first time ever yesterday. I was on a run, and I was thinking about this show and kind of what we were going to talk about. And it occurred to me that Nikon could come out with some variants on the Z9 itself. Use the same body as the Z9, which is extremely popular. People love it. It's sold extremely well. And I think people just have bought into the Z9, the big camera feeling, and Nikon, Canon, everybody can kind of thank Peter McKinnon for that becoming super mainstream with the 1DX Mark II. But what if Nikon did some variants on the Z9? So they did a Z9S, which was 80 or 100 megapixels. It didn't have all of the frame rate things, but it was designed for higher resolution. And they came out with a Z9, I don't know, V or something for video that was, honestly, I don't know what they would do different for video. Maybe put a flip screen in, I don't know, or make it slightly lower megapixels so that it has better sensitivity. But I feel like the Z9 is also already so good. But, they could start playing in that realm. And certainly with price points, they have that room to play with, because the Z9 is so much cheaper than the A1 and the R3 and what the R1 is going to be. So unless Canon shocks us and comes in at 5,500 too, which I doubt. So
I don't like.
I had that idea. I don't know that that's actually what they're going to do. Part of me, I love the design of the Z9 enough that I would love to see their high resolution body have that same overall design. But I'd also be happy with the Z8 being high res and not having a gripped body. I mean, I would enjoy that camera and definitely use it.
Would you get that instead of the Z9? Like, would you trade out or?
That would be TBD. I don't know.
Okay.
I'd have to figure that out. Depending. Certainly, it's possible. It's
That's
certainly
how
possible.
Nikon wins Kemper back all the way. Just
It
kidding.
But
really
see,
Or-
that's the issue. That's the issue with the Z8, and Nikon has to see that. Is that there's a lot of people who bought Z9s in 2022 who would sell their Z9s to get a Z8. Like there's a huge market share with because the Z9, a lot of D850 users bought Z9s, a lot.
Yeah.
And we had some industry news this week with numbers from October. Like the Z9 was the #1 selling camera in Japan, which I wish we had US numbers. That's random. But for October 2022, Z9 #1 selling camera in Japan, a flagship camera. So if I'm Nikon, I want to release a Z8 that people would buy and a Z9 instead of. So you're asking if I would replace it. If that is on my mind when they announce a Z8, then in my opinion, Nikon's kind of dropped the ball a little bit. It would need to have that. For Nikon to truly be successful in this area, I would think that Nikon would want to kind of have Z9 buyers and users want to keep their Z9 and add a Z8 instead of replace it. So that's tricky to me because the Z9 is just so broadly versatile.
Well, so reading through, I'm guessing what would actually happen is if in a situation in which you'd be happy with what Nikon chose, you'd be selling your R5 and switching from Canon over to Nikon.
No,
okay.
I won't do that. And that's maybe a story for another, a total story for another day. I'm not going to do that because of the 100 to 500 and because I want to stay somewhat invested in Canon because I really like where Canon's going to. I want to keep horses in both of those races. I don't know that there's something that Nikon could do right now to get me to 100% switch to Nikon. Just because I like what Canon's doing too. There's things about both companies that I really like. I mean, you know,
it would have been Nikon's 100 to 400 that would have done that, and they dropped the ball on that lens.
They did
for
drop
you
the
anyway.
ball a little bit.
What about a 200 to 400? Well, they're not 200 400. The 180 to 400. That theoretical lens that could come out.
Well, that's a lens I would really love to have. I would love to have a Z mount 180 to 400, like that pro level. But the 100 to 500 Canon is the same size as a 70 to 200 traditional 7200. So it would be a situation where there's lots of shots that I would use the 180 to 400 on. Yeah. And I really love and that lens really intrigues me, but the 100 to 500 is so versatile for what you're getting that I'm just going to keep that in my system. So in the way I'm looking at it right now, I would probably bail on Nikon before Canon at this point because of the 100 to 500 and what I've been able to get with that lens. And I'm fine with that. I'm interested in some of these huge Nikon lenses. Like I talked last week about the 600 f4 being my dream lens. That sits pat. That is my dream lens. Or the 120 to 300 in a Z mount or an F mount. Honestly, I'd take an F mount. But in the Z mount or that 180 to 400, I would do all those lenses and I would make great images. But I would always have that Canon 100 to 500 sitting there. So I guess if Nikon released an exact replica of the 100 to 500, but I enjoy having both. And I think both systems have real advantages and I kind of want to see where they both go and I want to stay invested in them.
Well, and there is to some degree an advantage of being able to own and test lenses for you guys as well. Listening to this, we're able to look at Nikon stuff seriously. And we do kind of hold an opinion that, I mean, don't get us wrong. If Canon or Nikon or any of them sent us pre-production copies to test, we would definitely test them out and tell you guys what we thought. Mm-hmm. But I think we definitely feel that living with a camera or lens or any sort of technology is really the only way to really be able to recommend it to people or not.
It's true.
There's so much that goes into a good tool, or whether a tool actually works well or not. And just grabbing the camera and testing out specs as quick as you can to get it out before an embargo date isn't necessarily the best way to do that. And I think it leads to emphasizing things that shouldn't be emphasized and totally skipping over other things that should not be skipped over. An example of
Right.
that with Nikon would be no one ever talked about the memory recall modes and the way that works on the Z9. I don't know exactly how they work either. Kemper
The
is the
memory
one who would
banks,
know
the
on
memory
that.
banks.
Memory banks. It's like a whole nother level of memory recall. Like, on the top of your camera, it has like those
Yes.
custom modes. It's like a whole, it's like that, but 3-dimensional.
Yes, it is.
And within that, I do think that there's value in us in Kemper, owning the multiple systems, because we're just able to talk about things better and help you guys more as well. And Sony will probably leak its way back into our system at some point,
Sony is
for the same
going to
reason.
leak its way back in at some point. Like, and I do not want this. This channel is not going to turn into a Sony hating channel. Sony right now is not the best fit for us. And unfortunately, the A7R5 that they just put out is not the best fit for us, but they are great cameras. And I think that Sony, look at what they've done in just since basically 2014.
So in 8 years.
In 8 years, they're punching with Canon and Nikon. They've beat Nikon largely. Like, as far as market share goes, like, Nikon is third place now. And Nikon used to be, Canon, Nikon 1-to-1. And, Canon's still holding that market share lead over both Sony and Nikon. But what Sony has done, so, just because we don't own Sony right now doesn't mean it's not going to leak in, and certainly doesn't mean that we don't respect it. But that is, to me, though, that kind of we kind of loop back around to why I love Nikon, why I will probably always have some kind of Nikon is that when you shoot with Nikon, they're the most successful company at you feel the legacy of where they came from. It is a true camera person's camera. And it's different than Fuji in that where, Fuji is all about the aesthetics and the experience and stuff. With Nikon, it's just is like, you feel like that they've been doing this for, since
you
World
feel
War
the
II.
Nat Geo feel,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah,
like, I don't,
it's that Nat Geo. I mean,
yeah.
their color is yellow. I mean, they're associated with National Geographic very strongly. And I feel like Nikon, that's kind of what they're leaning into. I mean, look at their lenses. Like, they want to be the National Geographic photographers' cameras. Like,
yeah,
look at where they're investing their time and energy right now. That's what they want. And
the telephoto,
good for them
lenses.
with the telephotos. And their telephotos are head and shoulders above Sony's and Canon's right now. Just because, I mean, all else being the same, the built-in 1.4 teleconverters, like, it adds a whole nother dimension to those lenses and how you shoot with them. That honestly, I would not be surprised to see both Canon and Sony coming out with built-in teleconverter lenses very soon. And we'll talk about that in the Canon and Sony shows. And that's honestly a lens that's on the rumored Sony lenses is a 180-400 with built-in teleconverter. That's actually something that they think is coming in 2023. And that would be a huge get for Sony to have the first mirrorless version of that kind of genre of lens, because there's a lot of people who, again, that's another, the Nikon 180-400 is another make your living lens, right? That a lot of people lean on. And the 200-400 from Canon, that's the same thing. So
that's kind of the one I'm looking forward to now that I'm
Yeah.
in Canon. Hopefully they
Yeah.
release that 200 to 400 f4,
Well,
right?
I think built-in teleconverters and the super telephotos are here to stay. The Canon 300-2.8, that's also a big rumor, is the patent shows that it has it. So like Nikon was the first to the game with that, but I think that that's just going to be, and in 5 years, it's going to be anybody's game again as far as those super telephoto lenses go. So
Yeah, for sure. I definitely came into this thinking like, oh yeah, 2023 is going to be a quiet year, but I'm actually wondering if 2023 is going to be quiet. Like, I guess we'll
I
see.
mean, you look at what's queued up. You look at what's queued up. You have the mythic Z8, whether that exists or not, but the Z6 III that exists, for pretty much for sure.
Yeah.
And then the Z7 III, like I'm guessing that exists. So, and those two cameras, like Nikon's got a real opportunity to blow it out of the park with those cameras and make a dent in the industry. So,
Well,
we'll
so
see.
so to round out the episode, there's like two questions I want to ask, and maybe we can answer them both. Maybe we should just pick one. What would it take for you to switch either fully or over to Nikon? What would Nikon need to do for that? And then the other question would be who should be shooting Nikon in 2023? What type of photographer or videographer? And maybe who shouldn't? Who should be maybe looking at the other brands if you are shooting Nikon, switch away?
Those are great questions, but hard questions, man.
I think I can answer the second one, and maybe the
Okay.
first one's more Kemper anyways. I can also throw an answer in there too for me, but I think that's more aimed at you, Kemper. For who should be shooting it in 2023, like wildlife photographers, I think is the big answer. Like people who are trying to go out and shoot like National
I
Geographic.
think that includes sports.
Oh, maybe not as much in my
Sports
opinion.
tax the
Honestly.
autofocus. Like the Z9 is really good autofocus, but it's that half beat behind Sony and Canon as far as the autofocus goes. It's not much, but it is enough that if you're a sports photographer, you're thinking
you're gonna
about
miss
it.
shots. And then also there, I have a few things actually. With Canon, I can't believe I'm the one defending Canon now. With Canon, you have the 70 to 200 and the 100 to 500, both usable on the R3. The R3 is a sports photographer's dream, I think. Yeah, you lose a little bit of that cropping capability, but like you have such a fast camera that can do also 30 frames a second, but also that new 100 to 95 frames per second. That like if you're shooting baseball or something like that's going to be killer. Like you're going to be able to get a shot where the ball is on the bat, or golfing or whatever. Like you lose your autofocus, so keep that in mind. But there's definitely some shots that you cannot get with like Nikon's 120 frame per second JPEG,
right?
like
In
it's just
JPEG medium or whatever it is. Yeah.
and 120 frames is super cool. Like, don't get me wrong, but the JPEG kills that a little bit in my mind. Like, I don't know. Autofocus, like Kemper was saying earlier, but then for sports photographers, like 400 2.8, if you have that, you're okay. I think you have a 70 to 200, you're okay. If you have the 100 to 500, honestly, I think you're set. Like, I don't think you need the other things. So I don't think Nikon's a bad option for sports photography, but I think Nikon is much better set up for wildlife photography. So that's my spiel on it. Yeah.
All right. So I do have an answer to the first question and possibly the second question. Oh, it looks like we have a comment here. Really enjoying your show. Suggest you check out the at Vahography and at AP Studios channels and live shows. You'd make some valuable input. Awesome.
I appreciate that.
Those out for sure.
I do watch Vahography, the rock and roll photographer. I have not checked out AP Studios. I will check him out though. Or them.
Thank you for that.
Right. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
Really appreciate that.
Yeah. So what I was going to say was, I think that if you are a landscape photographer, I don't think there's a major reason for you to I don't
Switch.
think there's a major reason for you to bounce at this point.
From Nikon
From
or to
Nikon.
Nikon?
From
No.
Nikon if you're a
Yeah.
landscape shooter. I don't know. I think to that answer, I don't know if there's a huge reason to switch to Nikon. I mean, the Z9, we saw so many Z9s shooting landscape
Right.
photography at the Maroon
It's not a
Bells.
bad
The
option.
120 to 300
Um,
is a reason. The 120 to 300 is a reason because it's very small and light and extremely sharp. The
What about the 24 to
Sony,
240?
the
Is that
well,
another
the
reason?
Canon 24 to 240 has some weird stuff going on with that lens. Now, I haven't owned it. I have done a ton of research on it though. It has some weird auto correcting stuff and weirdness with that lens. The Sony 24 to 105, honestly, that's the lens most in desperate need of a refresh. I feel like from them. The copy variants on that lens, I used 3 copies of that lens when I was shooting Sony, and they were all wildly different on how they rendered. Like it was not a consistency at all with that lens. And the best one was still not close to 24 120. So if you're a landscape photographer, that 24 to 120 is a big deal. And then you combine that with both the 14 to 30 f4 or the 14 to 24, which are 2 as far as landscape photography lenses go, real big hitters. So I feel like Nikon is making so I think you could combine it into nature if you're a nature photographer. Nature photographer or videographer, I think you could argue that too.
With the Z9 specifically.
With the Z9 specifically. Yeah. But if you're a nature photographer, then there's a Nikon is your best bet probably overall. I think the Canon 100 to 500 again makes a big case because that lens is just I've talked about it on live streams and other videos that 100 to 500 it is a notch better than the Sony and the Nikon 100 to 400s, just in image quality, versatility, the in-body image stabilization on it is just like and I'm biased, but like I've captured some of my favorite images with that lens and it's been consistent. So as far as like that goes, because that's such a huge nature wildlife lens. But with Nikon, you have the 400 4.5, which you're getting real pro wildlife stuff with for sure. And then the 2 big telephotos being so much better. And then 24 120. So I don't know. So to answer your first question, to kind of loop it back, if Nikon came out with a 100 to 500 that was exactly the same as Canon's, then I would fully switch. But until they do that, I'm probably keeping at least a Canon camera attached to that lens. I might switch everything else to Nikon at some point, but until that happens, I'm still going to use that. Yeah.
Okay. So Nikon. I'm going to answer both questions at the same time about what you need to get videographers to switch, because don't switch videographers right now. You need to just stay put. And what you need to do to make me switch, or at least buy a Nikon camera. I don't think I really want to just shoot just Nikon. I would be surprised if they pulled that off, but they need to release the Z6 III, and you need to give something in that camera that is flashy and cool and well implemented, whatever it is. So you need to do the bare minimum of removing the crop in 4K 60. You need to give us a flip screen. Those are the 2 necessities. I think if you do those 2 things, you just made a really excellent camera with the Z6 III. But do 6K internal recording with the 24 megapixel sensor, assuming you choose to keep the same, assuming they choose to keep 24 megapixels, or do 4K 120p, even if it's cropped in to APS-C mode in order to do it. Because what that's going to do is that's going to be like, look, we're here. We're the first to the third to this new generation of prosumer bodies. And we are going to give you guys something that feels next generation. And to me, native 6K recording or 4K 120, one of those two things. And man, if you could do both of them, then that would be huge.
Yeah.
But if
Blow
you
it out
could
of the
do just
water.
one,
Well,
and I don't care if it costs 2,500, just give up on having everything be cheaper because it doesn't look good. A lot of people just don't care. The Z6 II is cheaper by $500, but you also pay for it with the Z6 II, with the fact
Yeah.
that it shoots 8-bit internal video, the
Yep.
fact that it doesn't
No
really
10-bit.
have good N-Log implementation internal. Like you're paying for it with that camera. And I would really, really like to see Nikon's extremely crisp, nice video files. They just look great.
They do.
There's
They do.
Z6 II footage in our reel right now. You can go check it out. Some of the stuff
quite
is
a bit.
from that
Quite
camera.
a bit.
Well,
Because it
and,
looks great and
the
crispy
red.
and nice, and their AF is pretty good. It's not better than Nikon or Canon. It's not better than Sony or Canon, but it's pretty good. So like that's what you need to do.
Yep.
And I would be so hyped. I might not buy the camera necessarily just because I mean I have the R5C and I'm very pleased with
Very
it.
happy. Yep.
But I would, yeah, that's my rant about what you need to do.
10-bit
So,
video, please.
10-bit video is a big
Just
deal. They need to
don't-
get it in all their
Don't
cameras.
mess up on that one.
So Greg, to answer your question here, he asks, how good or bad is the Z100 to 400? I joined late and may have missed its mention. So maybe this is a good opportunity to tell my whole story with the 100 to 400Z because it is not a bad lens. But so I used the Canon 100 to 500 for about a year, the R5 and the 100 to 500. And then when the Z9 was coming on the horizon, I got excited. I fully switched to Nikon. And the 100 to 400 was part of the Z9. They announced it. They pre-announced it at the same time. And I'm like, oh, well, all the other Z lenses, because the 2470, 7200, 1424, all those lenses. I mean, every Z lens was outstanding. Like it toe to toe with the RF lenses. There's some things about the RF lenses that, may be slightly better, but toe to toe. I was like, yes, the 100 to 400Z is going to be just as amazing as those lenses. And the truth is that the 100 to 400Z is a really good lens, but my expectations just weren't quite met based on using the 100 to 500 and just how good the 7200 and 2470 were. It's very similar to the Sony 100 to 400. So, and that's a great lens. That's a great lens. So,
a lot of copy variants, though.
A lot of copy variants, and I'm concerned about copy variants with the Z100 to 400. So I made a whole video about it. About the if you look on our channel, I made a video about it. So the big issue I had with the Z100 to 400 was rendering at distant subjects was not very good. It just didn't hold up over long distances, which, like, I shoot enough telephoto. Most of my landscapes are telephoto. And so I shoot enough at that. I can kind of suss that out pretty easily. And that was the issue I had with it, is that it just was kind of mushy at distant subjects. Close-up stuff, great. But it was kind of mushy.
It must not have had the same coatings because, like, the atmospheric distortion shouldn't be a problem with.
Shouldn't be as much of a problem, right? And here's the thing: I owned the 100 to 400 and the 70 to 200 with the 1.4 teleconverter at the same time. The 1. Did I say 1.4 teleconverter? I think I said that.
Mm-hmm.
I owned them at the same time, and the 7200 with that 1.4 at 300 or 280, close to 300, was sharper than the 100 to 400 at 300, which that was kind of where I was like, oh, like this isn't worth it. And so, and then I also got spoiled absolutely rotten trying out the 120 to 300, which the image quality on that lens is, I don't even know how to. It's a whole nother
Okay,
stratosphere.
quick question.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they didn't come out with a 100 to 500, but they came out with a new designed as good as 100 to 500, better than that or the 120 to 300, but if they came out with a new 100 to or 120 to 300 lens, would that get you to switch? Basically, if they didn't have a 100 to 500, but they had a new one of those.
Not fully. I would get that lens. And maybe I would temporarily, like, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'd have to sell the farm.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about the 120 to 300 is that part of the way you're able to get that image quality is that it weighs 7 pounds, right? You know,
lens.
it's a big lens. I'm not taking that lens where I can take the 100 to 500 from Canon.
And Greg,
or at least not easily.
It's the Nikon F mount 120 to 300 2.8.
Yes, that's the lens I'm referring to. Yes. Someone else is asking, did I use multiple copies of the 100 400? I did not. So be that, you know, there are people that I've commented on that other video that said theirs is fine, but I did not use multiple copies of the 100 to 400Z. I wish I could have. I wish I was in a financial situation where that would have worked. But the truth was, and like, I did enough research and talked to several people who know their stuff about lenses that, you know, the issue I was having in particular is, you know, first off, it's a niche issue. Not a lot of people shoot super telephotos at infinity quite like that. Well, at infinity at distant subjects. So it's both. It's not just at infinity, because like infinity is actually not that far out when you really think about it. But it's at that distant subject multiple miles away or whatever that it's really the issue. So it's those two, that 1-2 punch. It just was not the same as the Canon. But there's
a lot of, I mean, when there are reviews on YouTube that say that it's sharp, like the lens isn't horrible at 400 at distant subjects. It's definitely not bad, and that's not really the point. The Kemper's point in that video is it's not keeping up with the competition. It's the least sharp for landscape photography at distant subjects. And he actually showcases in the video some photographs that are of closer up subjects, even stuff that's not super far away, like the opposite side
I did
of the
make
canyon.
some mistakes in that video. Unfortunately, some 24 to 120 stuff got mixed in, which, again, commenters have been very happy to point out to me that I made that mistake. But you can just trust us that, yes, up close, it's very sharp. I would say that if you are a wildlife shooter, if that's kind of your thing, the 100 to 400, don't really think about it too much. It's a great lens. Again, like, you know, I don't know, if you don't need clear out to 400, the 7200 with the 1.4 teleconverter, kind of a two birds with one stone. And there are some legit wildlife photographers out there who will back up that 1.4 teleconverter on the 7200 thing, because I can't think of the guy's name right now, but I referenced him in one of the comments on that other video. So,
well, and that's
I
will say that's a good point. Like, well, in general, Nikon's teleconverter is really good. Canon RF mount, you can't use the teleconverter, so keep that in mind.
Well, on the 7200, you can't. No, you can on the 100 to 500 if you zoom it out to 300, and then put it on after you zoom out.
Okay, there's a lot of stipulations.
The 7200, you cannot put a teleconverter on that 7200, and that is a good point. That is a good point.
And then I would just say for Sony, with my experience, and Kemper will probably agree, but the Sony teleconverter was there, I think, on image quality. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it was. Well, but I also only used it on the 7200 version 1 from Sony.
Oh my gosh.
And that was a very mediocre lens. lens.
Yeah,
The
definitely.
new one's good, but the version 1 7200 from Sony was not that great. So
No, Sony, like, not to change the subject to Sony, but they did so well on their Mark IIs for both the 24-70 and the 70-200.
oh yeah,
Not
Out of
above
the
them
ball.
right now,
Out
but
of the
yeah,
park.
just saying.
out of the park with those lenses.
So I guess here's kind of a wrap up question. If you guys had to say using stock language, would you guys say Nikon at the end of 2022, is it a bull or a bear market for Nikon? Is it trending up or is it trending
bull.
down?
Of the companies, it's in third place, but it's also got it's in third place, but it's got the most potential, I think, to knock it out of the park.
I think what we need to see is what happens after the Z9. Like, in terms of their professional lineup, like, I'm not counting the Z30 in that. Like, we need to see what their next camera is and how they implement any kind of tech that they had in the Z9. Like, that's what's really going to make a difference, I think.
But are you optimistic that that's going to look good, or
I am
are you
optimistic,
cautious? So
No,
you'd say a bull then as well.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of room, and I think they're actually copying a little bit, not copying, that's not the right word, but they're doing what Canon did where they're building out their lens setup, and then there's a chance that their bodies from, like, 2023 on are just going to be insane. They're going to have all this telephoto glass, and I'm excited to see what that is. Not really the camera system for me, I don't think, but that's, I guess,
I don't think either.
Yeah.
I don't know what Nikon could do. I mean, unless that 105 1.4 that they're probably not going to make, because it seems like the 135 is on the roadmap.
But if they did a 105 1.2 and a 35 1.2, and that's a bold statement. I don't think they're going to do that.
Well,
But
what do you think about the 56
35
0.95?
There is a
ridiculous.
35
Like,
1.2 on the road.
People are going to hate me for that. I'm not about that lens. I'm like, no manual focus. Like, or I mean, it's only manual focus.
Right. Only manual focus. Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, I love bokeh, but that's a little like, okay, what are we doing with bokeh right now? Like,
that's a lens that's on my to rent list. Although I'm very hesitant to do so because I would hate to rent it and then fall in love with it and have to figure out how to buy it.
I'll rent it and not fall in love with it. If people want to get the channel, get the money going for the channel, like and subscribe, please. Appreciate it. I will like it.
You will rent it and you will hate it.
There's Kemper's right. I'm gonna fall in love with it and be like, dang it. All right, Nikon. But
I mean, so Brandon, let me just dive in here and talk lenses for a second with you here.
Yeah.
Mess with your head a little bit. So sure. Like minimum focusing distance, 58 millimeters, 0.95. It's going to be, is the whole eyeball in focus at that point, or is like the curvature of the eye like going to be falling out on the edges? Probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's going to be like a part of the clear part of the eyeball that's in focus, so it doesn't even matter. Like, it's
you can't even get the retina in focus.
Indeed. But let's just talk about what we could do with that lens for fashion photography. Like, thinking busy city street, you're getting the whole outfit in there, but you're getting that 85-1.4 blur. But they're like standing 10 feet away from you, and you're getting that kind of blur.
What I find intriguing about that statement is that I actually would love to be able to shoot full body in a sense and get that blur with a full body shot. Like, because with an 85, you have to step back so far with an 85 or a 70-200, and like, I mean, 70-200 normally does a pretty good job at 200, but I think shooting the 58 full body, that's where the value's at in terms of portraiture. Like, I'm sure there's product and other things you can work into some other argument, but I think being able to shoot like a full body fashion shoot with that would be really cool. Would be worth a video if, like, we came to it. It's an interesting lens. I just don't know for me if I'm like, right now I'm going to be purchasing in the next week or two the Canon 85 1.2, and I don't think the Nikon 56.9 or whatever it is, 9.8 or
Right.
whatever.
It's 58, right?
58.95.
Is it 58 or 56? Oh my gosh, how do we not know this?
Oh my
It's
gosh,
a
I don't know.
58, I think.
58.
All right, Kemper,
Knock.
look it up. We have to know for
No,
sure
no.
Knocked.
before I wreck it. I need to-
There's something just so like rich about the word.
It is
knocked.
58. Do you guys remember how much it costs off the top of your head?
6,000.
6,000.
No, it is $79.96.
Oh my gosh.
Whoa.
It is 8,000.
I just can't
Ugh.
imagine. And that's with no autofocus. And I understand that autofocus was not going to be a thing. Like I guess I get the point. Like, but I'm like,
Brandon, you are such a bokeh. Like
I am.
You're
But
so
what,
obsessed with bokeh. You know exactly why you'd buy that lens.
Yeah.
8512 though, Toby. 8512 from Canon. Just saying.
8512. That's just
Ooh.
you're just ignoring everything.
New question for Kemper, I think.
Oh, 100 to 400 or 400 per 4.5.
Oh,
So
that's
the image quality on the 400 4.5 is astounding. Like it's a little, I feel like it's sharper than the 500 the 500 5.6 that came out. Like, so if you shoot at 400, then the 400 4.5. If you need that versatility, I understand why you would do the 100 to 400, but I'm a huge fan of the 400 4.5 so far. I'm going to be testing it out this weekend. I'm going out and gonna do a little bit of shooting this weekend. So honestly, maybe on next week's show I'll have even more input. But my initial testing is that it's super sharp, and then it handles so well. Like it being that half pound heavier than a 7200, even though it's like a little bigger physically, but it's a half pound heavier than the 7200, and it just
Isn't
it
it
feels
a half pound? Is it a half pound heavier or
half pound
lighter?
lighter. I'm sorry, I'm saying heavier. I mean it's lighter.
even better. Yeah.
It's 2.5 pounds instead of 3 pounds. So yeah,
It's
I mean,
crazy.
for
Like
me
Kemper
personally,
handed it to me, and it was like holding a cloud. Like it did not make sense what visually I was holding to how much weight
yeah,
it was.
I know
It's crazy.
it's weird.
Here's
So
the
for me
answer.
personally, yes, but if you need more versatility, then like I don't know, I'd maybe go for the 100 to 400.
Here's the answer you don't want is 70 to 200 and then the 400 4.5 would be just a fantastic combo. Like, and that's expensive, so I get it. I'm not trying to be that person,
Right.
but that's
yeah, I mean that is a
cheaper
outstanding
than a
1-2
knocked
combo, and it is cheaper than a knocked. So
yeah.
wow, that's yeah,
by a lot, kind of. And then we got another one, and this one I think both Kemper and I can speak to is
we can
51.2 is a beautiful lens.
It is.
Love that.
It's a beautiful lens. Nikon's is too dadgum big, but it's a beautiful lens. Sony's was really good on the size. I feel like
I loved it for all around. Like
yeah.
It's hard to. I think me and you go back and forth a little bit on between Canon and Nikon's version of the 51.2, but I love the Sony, and it had 4 autofocus motors in it, so Sony's was just so quick.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I don't know.
But the Nikon one, I for a week, and gorgeous lens. It's too big to be truly fit into my kit, but gorgeous lens. And I actually shot my daughter's 2nd birthday party with that lens, and so now I will always think about it.
In terms of
think
that,
about it fondly.
Think about it fondly. Yeah, good memories.
That lens in such a weird capacity because I did so much non 1.2 work on it, but I loved it. I still think I made the right choice. I love the lens, but I do a lot of commercial work.
1.2 is special. 1.2 is worth the hype. It is. It just is. The image quality that you get from a 1.2 is worth the hype. It's not just BS from the camera companies. Like the way that the separation you get, and I feel like 50 is the perfect lens to really showcase that, because it's wide enough that having it, I mean, maybe 35 would be that way too. I've never used a 35-1.2, but
I think
like-
it's
There's only the
different.
one, but next
it's-
year, hot prediction here. Nikon has a 35-1.2 on their roadmap.
right.
Canon
right.
has a 35-1.2 coming. I think that we're going to get the 35-1.2s, and I bet Sony will just throw one in there just because,
You
I
think-
mean,
you
technically,
thinking-
it'd be a little
Yeah.
weird. But
You think in 2023?
I mean, it'd
Not
be
in
weird because they
2023,
just
I don't
released
think.
the 35-1.4, but
Yeah.
they do have the Sigma 35-1.2, which is okay. Here's the thing, though. That lens has the light transmission of a 35-1.8, and that actually really dramatically impacts my interest in that lens, because for me, the 35-1.2, I'm really looking for that light transmission because it's such a wide lens.
And 'cause it's
I
your
do love
video,
shooting in
though.
the dark. So for me as a videographer, the 35-1.2 would be awesome. But I actually am considering getting a 50-1.2. Brandon and I were talking about that. The Canon
Yeah.
50-1.2
Got it.
just the other day.
That's a
I'm thinking
great
about it
lens
myself.
for you.
So
That's a
I'll-
great lens for you. Yeah.
I'll
I'd
say
rather have
from-
it be a 35 if I'm being honest, but still.
Well,
I'll
it's
say
coming.
from the other side, being a photographer, I think the 35-1.2 being a light transmission of 1.8, but still having the bokeh of a 1.2 actually is the side. Like, that's how I'd favor it to be. Like, I'd rather it be bokehing that way than like if it were the other way around, where it's like, oh, it has the light transmission of a 1.2, but the bokeh of a 1.8. So
I mean, that would be, I think, practically impossible, because it's just the reason why the light transmission's lower is I think there's just probably too much glass in that lens, and it's the way that it's refracting a lot of the light away. It's like getting lost in the barrel, which is why like every lens's t-stop is lower, I guess would be the right word for it,
Right.
than
Right.
its f-stop in
It's
almost
just
every
that
case.
particular lens, it's such a big gap that
It's
it
such a
needs to be
big
noted.
gap. That's
yeah, it's not
the
like a
issue
stop.
with that
It's
lens.
literally a 2-stop difference is the problem. But
F-stop is the measure of the depth of field. T-stop is like it's I don't know I could get into the story as to exactly why T-stop exists, but it's literally just to understand the light transmission of the lens so that you can expose properly between different lenses on a
Right.
cinema set. That's
Right.
really all that it is.
Yeah.
And it actually can be a little inaccurate to the f-stop of the lens, although most of the time with the cinema glass, they've just built them so that the t-stop and the f-stop are the same, which is part of the reason why they cost so much money. It's like one of those weird things where it's like, yes, it's a manual 51.4 that costs $8,000 for the one lens, talking about the Nox.
Right.
No,
But
definitely.
it's because everything's like so precisely done so that you can save time on set and not have weird exposure differences
Right.
between lenses. So
The other big thing with the Sony 35-1.4 that bothered me so much was how much, and this was solved on the A7 IV, not that it's the greatest camera ever, but the focus breathing was not good on the 35-1.4. And I
Yeah.
when it
felt that
sort of
sometimes.
fixes it, it does crop it in, so it's not a 35
Well,
exactly.
No,
Right.
it-
Well, and I was
yeah.
going to say, Toby, that like you were thinking about the 51.2. I think you should hold out for the 35-1.2 because it's just such a, like, 35 is so good for video. There's just so much good stuff you could get with that. And that's just
Yeah,
going
and
to
I
be a
still
gorgeous lens.
have
Yeah.
my 35.
What you get with each of these lenses and the
Still have my
1.2 always makes it
35-1.4
so much
here.
cooler. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
The
is that
Rokinon, right?
the
The
Rokinon?
Rokinon. It's my
Oh, you
it's one of
got
my
some
oldest
cool
pieces
stuff
of
with that
kit.
lens.
We
Yep.
did actually at the intro to the show, Brandon in front of Little Bear is with this lens in the moonlight on a Panasonic S1,
Boy,
which
how times have
is
changed.
fun indeed.
Things have changed.
But
I
I
would-
do love that lens. So yeah, 35. I kind of agree with Kemper, but also I've seen the 51.2 used to incredible effect. So maybe I'll just have to buy all of them. Who
Oh,
knows?
maybe you'll have to buy all of them. Yeah.
I will say the nice thing about 35 is at a low depth of field, you get such a dreamy look with it. And that makes it also cinematic. Like it's just such a cool look. 50 is so like what our eye sees. So that's cool. And then 85 has so much compression. So they all have like a little different like thing with them. But
Mhm.
35 is especially cool at a low aperture. So
Mhm. All right, chat. We're about to wrap up, but do you guys have any final thoughts on the state of Nikon in 2022 going into 2023? Just or any more questions? Because we're like, I think Nikon's in a strong place. I think the Z9 has put them back on the map. I think that
It's the
they
Z9
need-
is what has put them in a strong place.
that, I mean,
that is
that's
the-
exactly right. It's the
It's
Z9.
it's not Nikon anymore. It's
Right.
Z9. And then
Exactly.
Nikon
Exactly. And I think they will have a successful 2023 if they are able to take the momentum from the Z9 and branch it out into more camera bodies and diversify their user base a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what success looks like for Nikon in 2023, I think, to just kind of sum it up. So,
Indeed.
all right. It
All
has
right.
been a super fun show, and
Has been.
I'm looking forward to going after the Canon next week. We do have a comment. First Z lens is the 85-1.8. It's a very good lens with 1.9 transmission. I want to try that lens. I really do. I've heard really good things about that lens, and I like 1.8. So that may be a rent for me, and see if I
Yeah, and that's actually very common of a good lens to have like a 1/10 lower transmission than the f-stop is a sign of a good transmission lens. Actually the Rokinon here is a T. Yeah, it's a T1.5. It's exactly the same. So it's actually fairly common that just like 1/10 of the light, if you will, gets kind of 1/10 of a stop of light gets lost in the lens.
whatever.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's 85-1.8s are super useful. I really wish Canon's wasn't trash.
Well,
and
it's not
that'll
even
be
a
what
1.8.
we'll talk
it's
about
an
It's a
f2.
1.2.
Oh, we can
It's
talk
an
about that next
f2.
week.
Autofocus, noise, and problem.
Indeed.
Sorry, I'll shut up. I like.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much for watching,
Thanks so
everyone.
much for tuning in. Yeah.
Cool.
We'd
We'll be back
appreciate a
next
like
week.
and subscribe on this video. Come back next week for State of Canon. As with the caveat with that being, if something huge gets announced, like last week, so much stuff got announced, we kind of had to change our plan, but I don't think that's on the horizon. I think we'll do State of Canon next week, and we'll have just as much to talk about, if not more, because of the
Well, so much to talk about.
R1 coming.
Please comment anything you guys want us to specifically cover. We definitely want to do that for you guys. So anything you guys
absolutely
think.
Yeah, we'll still respond to comments on this video after the stream ends. So yeah,
And we can confront them in the video too. So all
we
right.
can confront them.
Next video. Canon video.
Okay. Yeah,
Well, we're going to be confronting Sony in 2 weeks, so be sure to come back.
oh
for that.
boy,
Just
Oh,
kidding.
boy.
that one's the one I'm most nervous about. The Sony show is the one I'm nervous about, because like it's just Sony's the most interesting right now, in my
And
opinion.
I still have a little bit of Sony fanboy in me, so I'm like ready to
yeah.
defend it a little bit.
Those-
I mean, we'll see.
those fighting words are coming. All right. Thanks so much.
See you guys
and
on the
we
next
will-
Thanks,
adventure.
everybody.
See you on the next adventure. Bye.
Peace.